128 billion euros. That's the amount of money Europeans spent on booze last year alone. But why? Everybody knows that alcohol kills brain cells, is expensive and makes you sound like you're doing an Elon Musk impression of Mr. Beast. Still, almost everybody seems to drink some, from world leaders to the tweak on the street. Alcoholic beverage companies have infested most facets of media and annually spent billions to ensure you keep buying their shitty product. But why? Why do we spend so much money on alcohol each year? What role do these companies play? And what does Burundi have to do with this?
我在北京
Okay, well, let's start at the start. Just like most great inventions, drinking alcohol started in ancient China, where around 7000 BC, the first evidence was found of humans consuming fermented rice. Actual beer was first made by the Egyptians and Mesopotamians, but these alcoholic beverages weren't too strong, sitting around 2 to 3%. Fast forward to the Middle Ages and alcohol is consumed all over the world, in all different types. Somewhat counterintuitively, alcohol was quite useful at the time. It's the 15th century and let's say that you, hypothetically speaking, want to discover the world. Well, you would go by boat. And on board of a ship, keeping your water fresh can be a challenge, especially if you're gone for months on end. This problem can easily be overcome by just pouring a bit of grog into your water, which will now stay fresh and clean. Alcohol has this one useful perk that at a higher concentration, it kills germs and viruses. That's why we still use it in things like
disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute.
It was during the Renaissance that non-alcoholic alternatives like coffee started to gain some prominence. Coffee came over from the Middle East, where it had already been consumed for over 200 years. It was also during this time that this truly self-invented good called tea became an option for the wealthy British aristocracy. Water also began to be less sewage tasting and disease ridden. And in some cities, you wouldn't even perish after consuming a glass. Still, these alcoholic alternatives remained sparse and only available for the wealthy, with large swaths of society still heavily reliant on mildly alcoholic beverages. In the next centuries, alcohol was basically the TikTok of its time. Everyone relied on it, it was everywhere, and if it was banned, people would go absolutely mad. This, in the Western world, lasted until the Industrial Revolution came around, where steam engines chugged along like caffeinated toddlers on crack. Factories became just as common as soulless influencers, and cities expanded rapidly. A new class seemed to emerge, with people earning a bit more money on a more consistent basis. These new pesky lower middle class people now demanded all sorts of pathetic things, like workers' rights and better pay. And they needed something to spend the tiny amount of money they had left at the end of the month on. Enter this Dutch liquor called Jenever, or like the Britons know it, gin. In Britain and the US, stronger alcoholic beverages like gin quickly rose to popularity in the 18th and 19th century because they were a relatively cheap way to get drunk. The high amount of gin consumption had its consequences, however. Factory owners quickly realized that drunk employees combined with heavy machinery was bad for productivity. Because you know, these new pieces of machinery were excellent at cutting off a few expensive fingers, limbs, or other bodily parts. Another group displeased with all this sinful behavior was the Sinless Church, which began organizing a temperance movement which aimed at reducing the total alcohol consumption. This movement got the backing from all types of groups, with broad support among women in general, because they were often the victims of alcohol abuse. Another group completely in support of the temperance movement were factory owners, who were big fans of their workers being less drunk at work, increasing productivity and having less expensive accidents. In the US, this movement culminated in the ultimate party pooper move, the prohibition. Alcohol was made illegal and its production banned, or in most cases just outsourced to well-fitted Italian and Irish businessmen. Gin surged in popularity again because of its relative quick production time. Broadly speaking, getting alcohol during the Prohibition was as easy as getting shot by an ICE agent in modern day America. Even doctors were in on the scam, medically prescribing bottles of gin as the cure to general weakness or having a fever. The Prohibition was swiftly ended in 1933. It's broadly seen as a failed experiment because it didn't achieve its main goal of sobering up America. Alcohol consumption experienced a minor boom after both world wars, with more and more people having enough money to consume. But this rise ended in the 80s and 90s, with the arrival of even more awareness campaigns against the health risks of drinking alcohol and the rise of a new issue: drunk drivers. Nowadays, health-conscious trends have led to a rise of non-alcoholic beverages, and alcohol consumption has taken a turn to craft and artisanal everything, with bearded hipsters now drinking their $9 IPAs while acting like they enjoy the taste. Alcohol consumption is so low that in some countries the government has actively started promoting alcohol consumption again in hopes of boosting alcohol sales, or in Japan's case, birth rate. But all of this doesn't really answer the title of the video. Personally, I think people drink for several reasons. Firstly, it helps them loosen up. Your boring personality seems way more interesting after having a few drinks, and everything seems way funnier. Alcoholic companies know this and typically try to push this point again and again, trying to instill this idea of needing alcohol to have a good time. Of course, there's also peer pressure. If you're at a party and everybody's drinking, you'll soon enough find yourself needing to explain why you don't drink. There's also a significant group of people who drink alcohol to cope with life, using alcohol as a means to escape reality. In that sense, alcohol is just like any other drug, except you can get it at every corner store for a fairly reasonable price. Then there's the last and in my eyes most devious factor: marketing and media influences. I know that you as an individual are way too smart and far too well informed to be influenced by marketing, but bluntly speaking, it works. There's a reason companies spend billions on advertising. A prime example of this is the Dutch company Heineken, which annually spends about 1.3 billion euros on marketing. I'm now in front of their tourist experience building here in the center of Amsterdam. Don't really know why and I've never been inside. Anyways, Heineken tastes like rodent-infested sewage water, but they still manage to sell about 35 million barrels of beer each year. That's because Heineken is great at a few things. Firstly, they spend a lot of money shoving their drink in your face through direct and indirect advertisement. In their ads, they try and instill the idea that any party needs some beer. Look, Max Verstappen drinks beer as well. And look at these athletes. They still drink Heineken, so it can't be bad for me at all. Heineken's modern campaigns have changed strategy a bit, as they now also try to promote alcohol-free versions of their drink, and the genius idea that someone who drinks probably shouldn't be driving. Furthermore, Heineken is the prime example of a modern multinational, being active in over 190 countries. And quite surprisingly to me at least, it is the market leader in Africa, and they make absolute bank there. All the beer they sell is on average 50% more profitable in Africa than in Europe, for example, because of the lower production costs. This, combined with the fact that they still charge roughly the same price you would pay for a bottle in Europe, makes selling beer extremely profitable, in Africa especially. Heineken's role in Africa seems to in some cases be at best uninformed negligence, and at worst direct support to straight-out dictators and oppressive regimes. Look at Burundi, for example. In Burundi, Heineken represents about 10% of the entire GDP of the country, or about 1/3 of total tax revenue. They're basically the biggest state sponsor, and they help the government stay in power through their taxes. According to human rights reports, the government has been actively suppressing the opposition, with 24 reported disappearances, and with the president actively calling for the public execution of gay people. Maybe not the ideal country to do business in. But as a fun side note, the former chairman of the Constitutional Court of Burundi was a literal member of the board of Heineken's daughter company in Burundi, showcasing how close Heineken and the government seem to be. And yes, Heineken has tons of good projects as well. They provide jobs and livelihoods in countries where there aren't too many employment opportunities. But as Reezy put it, they truly go where other beer companies don't dare to go. from time to time supporting literal dictators and oppressive regimes, all in pursuit of profit. The book Heineken in Africa covers everything I said in way more detail if you're interested. So definitely read up to that if you want to know more. Okay, blah blah blah, we get it, big company bad. But me and the boys love going out for a drink. And what's wrong with that? Well, I'm not really trying to be one of those productivity lifestyle TikTok gurus who's like, yo, wake up at 4 a.m, drink this 85% protein shake and then meditate for 12 hours straight. But shockingly, they might, in this rare case, be onto something at least. Drinking alcohol is a great time, but it's also literal poison which you are ingesting into your system. And I know you and the boys love drinking those shots, but alcohol causes your brain cells to die. Actually, well, technically alcohol
doesn't kill brain cells, but it disrupts the communication between brain cells, which is something really different to killing brain cells, but it
has exactly the same consequence.
Separate from losing brain cells, alcohol also has way broader effects on society. Drunk people are way more likely to start a fight, and they directly cause about 40% of all fatal car accidents. Even worse, according to the WHO, the use of alcohol causes about 3 million deaths annually. That's about 5% of all deaths in general. Imagine if I came up with a brand new product called Lubai Locklet, or literally any other new product for that matter, and it had the minor side effect of killing 3 million people, it would be instantly banned. Then there's even more boring neoliberal arguments like that alcohol hurts productivity. A study conducted in the Netherlands, for example, found that about 5.5 million working days were lost to people staying home because they were being hung over. Womp womp. Even after all of this, I don't want to ban alcohol. That shit just doesn't work. Ask your 140-year-old grandfather. I still want to be able to drink, and some of my best memories were made while being drunk. And if you're old enough, I believe you should make that choice for yourself. The issue I have with drinking is that we act as if it's any different than any other drugs. It's not. It's just normalized. Alcohol is literally normalized crack. It's addictive, cheap, and super easy to get. Except if you're in one of these countries, but shh. The alcohol lobby has effectively shaped public opinion, sponsoring politicians and public policy in their favor, and that's the issue. Governments all over the world benefit from the sale of alcohol, and especially in more oppressive regimes, this money is used to stay in power. Which, in my eyes, is the bigger issue with alcohol globally. Well, this was my perspective. The editing took at least 2.5 months. You can maybe see it in the length of my hair. But thank you for watching. I hope this was interesting, and see you next year.